Jess has the news headlines.
Volunteers who help homeless people in Swindon are claiming that rough sleepers are being intimidated by council officials.
BBC Wiltshire.
6 minutes past 7, and now a homeless group in Swindon is calling for people living on the streets to be treated with more respect following allegations of intimidation. Louise Morecambe runs Swindon Homeless Volunteers and says she's seen belongings taken by the authorities and later told that they'd be taken to a tip. Well, BBC Wiltshire's Karen Gardner met her in the town centre and asked her if she ever felt vulnerable amongst the homeless community in Swindon.
I'm more scared of the public than I am of the homeless. The homeless guys, one of them, for instance, saved me and my children last week. I was being attacked by 2 grown women in front of my children in broad daylight, and it was a homeless man with a sleeping bag that saved me. It's just, only way I could describe it is don't look at their clothes, look beyond the clothes. It's a person, it's someone's son, it's someone's brother, and they're really, really amazing.
Now, you've got to know them, they've got to know you. What have you been able to do to help? Because you're not a charity, you're a self-funding group.
We do all sorts. It's like if they want to get in touch with their family, we work with them for a few months so their family can slowly get involved with them, and quite a few of them now, we're in constant touch with their family and relations are getting really good.
So does that give you hope for their future?
Yeah, it gives me a lot of hope because, like, one of our guys, we found him rock bottom in a tent under the Wyvern Bridge, and he really was rock bottom. He was nearly dying. He eventually got into rehab. He's come out of rehab and he is doing incredible now.
Now, Louise, what is it that you can achieve as just members of the public who got together in a loose, informal group that the agencies who are experts on these can't achieve? Because when you say things like you get them into rehab or you support them to contact their family, I think of the organisations who have all those structures and rules and regulations. So where is the balance? Why are you effective?
I think we're effective because with the agents and the agencies, they do a fantastic job and they work so hard. A lot of them are volunteers like us. But with us, we do grounds-on work. So we work around Swindon Town Centre and Swindon, and we actually go out there and get the real statistics. So it's not like the council said when we had the snow, there were 6 people left on the streets that chose to be there. We found 17 that night. It's a case of actually somebody getting out there and looking and actually seeing the truth.
Can you think of somebody who you think is one of your biggest success stories?
Yeah, Stuart.
Tell me about Stuart.
So Stuart lived in a car park in Debenhams for months and months and months before he moved there. From day one, we just knew he was special and he cared a lot about us as people, made everybody happy. He worked really hard with us for months to get to where he is now, and he's been in his home for 3 weeks. We got him off the streets and he's so house proud. It's just, he does the night walks with us and helps the homeless now.
So you've got a flat to live in. How have you managed to achieve that?
It's like we're self-funded, so we fund off the public and they donate. And it was a case of, we had to raise nearly £2,000. We had to find a landlord that accepts DSS, which is like finding a needle in a haystack. But when we did, we took Stuart to all his appointments and meetings, and it was amazing.
So he's now comfortable, safe, warm. And how many people do you think are truly homeless, sleeping on the streets in Swindon?
Around 45.
Do you think you can do that 45 times?
I don't think we can do it 45 times. It depends on each individual. Some do want to stay on the streets if they've been on the streets for a long time and it's their way of living. But I'd say there's at least 25 people out there that are desperate for the opportunity we've just given Stuart.
Louise Morecambe, who runs Swindon Homeless Volunteers, with Karen Gardner out on the streets in Swindon Town Centre. Well, she's here in the studio with us as well this morning. Louise, welcome.
Hi.
That's what you do in a nutshell. I mean, bottom line, how do you feel homeless people are treated by authorities in Swindon?
I think they're treated really badly, and that's the truth. I think a lot of lies have been told. I think there should be extra support for them, and they shouldn't just be labelled as what they are during the day. And I think that they should be helped during the night.
When you say lies, you mean what, figure-wise?
No, not so much the figures. It's just, they're all looked at as beggars and on drugs and drink. And it's just a whole new picture out there. It's completely different to what people are seeing and what people are hearing. There are a few homeless people that give the others a bad name, but then there's a majority of them that need this, just this chance.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, what about those that might be listening, and we get it time and time again, the good and the bad of Swindon, often people with derogatory comments about Swindon saying the place is a tip in places. the homeless people don't make it welcoming. You might argue all that In Swindon are doing is responding to those comments and trying to regenerate.
How are the homeless people going to start respecting the streets and start respecting car parks when it's the actual system that is treating them badly and disrespecting them in the first place? They are merely responding to that, and they have such little self-respect to themselves. They don't have any respect left to themselves. So why are they going to get up in the morning and pick up a bit of rubbish when there's been people through the night tipping their possessions and their tents, leaving them on the floor freezing cold, and tipping their lifelong belongings?
And what about that point? How far should someone, do you think, be allowed to go to make up their home publicly? You speak about Stuart being house proud. There might be people saying, well, as long as they're tucked away, they can do what they want. Others might find it not the solution to have people there creating their own kind of abode in a car park.
I 100% agree. I think then the council need to do more to get these people off the streets. 12-week shelters are just not good enough. That's 12 weeks. It's a growing problem, and we have more people on our streets today than we did before that project.
Now, we've spoken to Di Powell, the Chief Executive of In Swindon, who says she's reviewing CCTV of an incident involving you and some members of her team. She also says that anyone who wants to volunteer to help the homeless in Swindon can join one of the existing charities, almost like Karen was touching upon when she was speaking to you in that piece there, who work alongside and in conjunction with the relative agencies. Would that not be easier?
Yeah, we do that. We correspondent with Threshold and Colfrey Court, so we do work together with a few of them and we help each other out, but there's a couple of them we just don't work with for various reasons because we don't agree with the way they are.
Want to expand on that?
Swindon Borough Council.
What aren't they doing in your eyes that they could be doing better?
I just think they lie a lot, basically. I go to meetings with them.
You think or you know?
I know.
It's a bit bold claim. We'll hear what they say in just a second. But
I know they lie because I went to a meeting a couple of months ago and we was told only abandoned tents and possessions are binned and stuff like that. It would not happen again. Things are going to change immediately. And after that, we had the big town sweep, and it's happening still today. And it got to the point where we was giving somebody a tent, say a lady, for instance, at 12 o'clock at night. By 6 a.m, Swindon Borough Council were out in their little trucks and they was tipping them. And these were actually being lived in. So it goes against everything.
They said to us a considerable amount of duvets, furniture, barbecues, tents and general waste have recently been abandoned for several days in our town centre car parks. The council has and will continue to remove these items as set out in the notices displayed in car parks. They would get flack from some, maybe many, if they didn't do what they were doing, wouldn't they?
Well, surely...
You might find it heartless, but are they between a rock and a hard place?
No, definitely not. Because surely if the council actually give them somewhere to sleep, if they can't sleep in car parks and they can't sleep under the Wyvern Bridge or wherever they do sleep, then where are they going to sleep? We had a guy die a couple of weeks ago, and we had a second male die nearly a couple of days ago because of council tipping. These are people's lives.
They also say they are reviewing their approach to what they say is a challenging situation over the summer, and they will be consulting with hosts as part of their Rough Sleepers strategy. Does that fill you with any hope?
No. Actions speak louder than words, and, the summer's too late. One of our guys died in the winter, and he went to them for help and got turned away.
We'll ask what that they make of that, because
I know what they make of that.
As soon as you get into these conversations, they're huge matters. There's nothing more important.
They are
really.
Huge matters, and I've tried to correspond with them through email and through phone, and I always get told to provide phone records, which I do, and then they do not reply to me, and it's just getting worse and worse. But I'd love a message from them.
Are you a lone voice? I suppose, people are listening and they're new to this because it doesn't affect most people on a day-to-day basis. They might be thinking, right, you against the council. If it was you and 50, 100 other people, you might have more of a claim. Is this a kind of personal you against them? No,
absolutely not. I'm the voice of 45 people that's sleeping rough on the streets. I'm the voice of 7,000 people that's on my group. I am also the voice...
This is the Facebook group.
Yeah. I'm just basically here today because nobody else could make it.
What's the vision for you? It is complex.
The vision is, if their tents are tipped and their possessions are tipped, then the council offer them another solution, somewhere else to go, somewhere else to stay. There's more shelters opened, it's a long-term fix. And it doesn't matter if they've got addictions, it doesn't matter if they're drinking. There needs to be something else out there, not just Turning Point for that too, because it's just got worse and funding's gone down. So money needs to be found somewhere to help the people. How are they meant to get off this, how are they meant to get off drink if they're on the streets, sleeping in a dirty corner? Because I sure as hell wouldn't.
For now, thanks for coming in. Swindon Council, as I say, I'm sure we'll respond to that in due course here on BBC Wiltshire, but we read you their statement. 7:16. Our guest is rolling her eyes. We'll see what comes out in the wash. Thank you for joining us. More on that after 8 o'clock here on Breakfast. Now, the co-founder of a homeless support group in Swindon has criticised officials who deal with them in the town, saying they've been intimidated and their belongings taken. Louise Morecambe runs Swindon Homeless Volunteers, which provides food and bedding for anyone living on the streets. Well, she's been speaking to BBC Watch's Karen Gardner about what she says she's seen. And we were wanting to hear a bit about that now. We can't at the moment, but we will. In the meantime, let me just tell you that she was in earlier on. After the report that you're going to hear in just a bit from On the Streets, Louise was in the studio, an impassioned plea to the more established charities that are out there to try to help people. Also to Wiltshire Council, who she made some pretty bold, strong claims against in terms of misinterpreting data and taking away belongings. But I did put it to her that there are other people out there who I'm sure would say you can't just have homeless people setting up, in inverted commas, homeless abodes in car parks. It simply can't be done. The car parks are car parks. They're not homes for people, however unfortunate they are in their circumstances. Karen Gardner, as I say, has been out and about with Louise Morecambe. Here they are.
The tent tipping, the blanket tipping. I've seen people asleep on the floor and they're not in the way of nobody. They're in a corner of a car park and they are asked in a nasty way to move, and it's not in a nice way. When I've approached these people, they have basically took my picture and told me to move on, that the police are called, and the police are never called. It's just another way of trying to get us to move people off the floor. They're just unsightly, aren't they, to them? They just look like a bit of rubbish.
And that's how you see them being treated. What happens if someone loses their duvet and their sleeping bags? Here now, around the back of Pound World Plus, just 100 metres from the main shopping centre in Swindon, we've got a rolled up duvet and sleeping bag, we've got some clothes hanging on a rail. Will someone have left this and want to come back to it this evening?
Yeah, somebody does stay here all the time, we know him, and it's a case of if this is left more than 2 hours, this will be gone later. We will ring the council and ask them if they can give it back, and we're basically told we're past pillar to post, and eventually we get told that it's gone to the landfill tip.
So then you'll find something else to give this guy to survive another night?
Yeah, the people on our group, they donate quilts and tents and blankets, and we're doing SOS calls 24 hours a day. Even 3 o'clock in the morning in the snow, we will replace absolutely anything, and we'll never stop.
So why do you think some of the people responsible for looking after the town centre are behaving in the way that you've seen? How can you change that?
I don't know how I can change it. I'm doing everything that needs to be done. It's a case of they need to change the way they're doing things and actually come out on the grounds and seeing what's going on. And whoever keeps doing this thing where I agree 100% things need to be tipped if it's affecting the public, affecting children. But when it's just a sleeping bag rolled up in a corner or someone's bank card or possessions, I don't agree with that at all. There's no reason for it. If they're going to tip something, then at least they can do is put these people into accommodation.
Louise Morecambe running Swindon Homeless Volunteers talking to Karen Gardner. BBC Wiltshire's Will Wilder is here. Importantly, what response we had to her claims?
Well, Ben, we've spoken to Di Powell, the chief executive of In Swindon, who says she's reviewing CCTV of an incident involving Louise Morecambe and some members of her team. She says that anyone who wants to volunteer to help the homeless in Swindon can join one of the existing charities in the town, which works alongside and in conjunction with the relative agencies. We've also spoken to Swindon Borough Council, and they say that a considerable amount of duvets, furniture, barbecues, tents and general waste has recently apparently been abandoned for several days in the town centre car parks. Now, they say the council has and will continue to remove these items as set out in the notices displayed there. But they also say they're reviewing their approach to what they say is a challenging situation over this summer, and they'll be consulting with hosts as part of their Rough Sleepers strategy.
Well, one organisation that deals with groups like Swindon Homeless Volunteers is Threshold, who aim to secure the right to housing, particularly for households experiencing the problems of poverty and exclusion. The chief executive for that charity, Graham Willis, joins us now. Graham, good morning.
Good morning.
Is this a problem you've heard about specifically?
Yes, it is. It is. One of the things that we've been doing for many years ourselves is handing out bedding for people really as a last resort. If there is nowhere else for somebody to go, then it's a humanitarian response to hand out bedding. And we probably hand out upwards of 500 sleeping bags, duvets a year ourselves. One of the things we've been trying to do, because we do recognise it is an issue, is to get lockers placed in the town, secure lockers, so that people can put their bedding in those lockers and you don't have to resort to leaving it in a car park. One of the things we see, people losing their ID, which makes it very difficult then for any other job hunting, bank accounts, what have you, making benefit claims. So having secure lockers where people can leave their possessions and their bedding means that they then can go on to appointments. One of the things we see is people are really reluctant to go and have housing interviews and assessments because they're leaving their stuff behind. It's so insecure that they fear that they'll come back and the stuff will have been removed.
Do you have sympathy for councils who, on one hand, get flack from people who maybe don't have much sympathy for the homeless people, who say, Swindon in certain parts looks like a dump. Why would I want to go there? I feel threatened by homeless people. We hear it on this show time and time again. And then wanting to be a compassionate council, doing something for the people who we're talking about.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? I mean, it's one of those issues that we work closely with all of the agencies within Swindon, with the council, with the police, because, there is a need for enforcement. You can't have aggressive begging. You can't have people using drugs on the streets. Nobody should be on the streets. Let's face it. In a modern 21st century country, nobody should be sleeping on the streets. What we have to do is balance that kind of humanitarian response with the provision of quality accommodation for people. We've got a town where we've got 2 hostels, Colbury Court and Booth House, and can accommodate 70 people. But the move on accommodation from that is where the gap is. That's where the logjam is. So it's actually having the provision in town to get people off the streets, move them through the process back into kind of mainstream society. The logjam is at that move on stage.
And Graham, what about those, and I'm presuming it's a small minority, and maybe you could advise me, who don't want to go into more formal settings and actually just want to live on the streets, want to have the duvets, want to have the mattresses in the corner of the car park, want to maybe have the lockers you speak of? I mean, how far do you give an individual the right to just set up some kind of ad hoc home in a public place?
Well, I think you're working with people who have, on the whole, mental health issues, alcohol issues, drug issues. And they may have experienced post-traumatic stress whilst they're in the forces, a whole range of different complex issues. You have to work very slowly and diligently with those people, but you have to be persistent. Part of an outreach approach has to have a degree of assertiveness about it. The idea is that nobody should be on the street. So just because you're choosing to be on the streets, if you're going to do that, you need to do it in such a way that you're not causing any issues for other people. There are plenty of other places that you can sleep. You don't have to be in a visible position.
Graham Willis, thank you, the Chief Executive of Threshold, joining us there. Your thoughts on that one as well? There's a lot to get your teeth into today. Big issues on the programme. 8:16 is the time. Ben with you on Breakfast on BBC Wiltshire.